Welcome to Learn Literacy, the podcast that brings you inspiring conversations that focus on teaching literacy through language and structure. I am your host, Cheryl Urbanzik, an experienced educator and passionate advocate on a mission inspired by my family's experience with dyslexia. Each episode explores topics that help us understand how we can teach the language as it is to the student as they are. Tune in and become part of a community dedicated to supporting language for life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Learn Literacy podcast, where we focus on language for life by teaching literacy through language and structure. I'm very excited today to have as my guest Trixie Pujol, a clinical counselor who is based in Kenya. So welcome, Trixie. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I'm very excited to learn from you various ways we can support students from like an emotional and well-being point of view in our remediation lessons or in classrooms and that kind of thing. And I know you have a great background in this. We'll just jump in and get started. Trauma-informed responses are important and getting more well-known in education, but it would be really interesting to hear and understand how the brain of a child, like with a learning disability or who's struggling in school, resembles that of a trauma-exposed brain.
Sure. So I speak quite a bit lately on emotional regulation and trauma. And I think when we're talking about a child who has learning difficulty or learns differency, neurodivergent children, often it can often be that they get emotionally dysregulated because things are a bit overwhelming. So when I often talk about trauma, but we talk about trauma and we think of like severe trauma or like PTSD or when children have been abused or neglected or, severe things. But actually, when I talk about trauma, I think of like trauma, stress, and neurodivergence. And I like to look at the link between like dysregulation, behavior, and learning challenges, because what we see going on in the brain is similar. And so if we learn trauma-informed approaches, we will be able to support all of our children, and nobody, like all children, will benefit from this kind of learning, of thinking, I would say. So if we look at our hand, I don't know if you've seen this model. This is Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. And so if it's a great way to show children, and it's nice to like give children language around this, not just as the adults understanding it, but also the children. So if we look at this and we think, this is our prefrontal cortex, which is here. This is where we think, organize, plan, carry out anything we do. And so in learning, we have a lot of that, but everyday life, organizational skills, driving somewhere, figuring out what we have in our bag to take to work or school, all of that's in here. How to write a paper, how to read, everything is in here. And so this is our this is our prefrontal cortex. And then if we go inside here, this is our amygdala. So this is our emotions. And then down here, this is our survival brain. This is our brainstem. This is our limbic system and our brainstem. And so often, like one model you see with this, the kids will talk about, this is our thinking brain. And when it goes offline nowadays with kids, they don't only understand that language. And the emotional brain takes over. This is called flipping your lid. So this is a model that like is really easy to show. This is our thinking brain. This is our emotions. And this is kind of our reptilian brain, our survival functions. Easy to explain to kids. We can talk about being online and offline and our flipping our lid. So this is one model that I use to help explain this to kids. And when our brain goes into trauma, our stress and impact on the nervous system is really large, really high. So it's trauma, stress, and also there's like trauma, big trauma, and there's something in the field we call it small t, small traumas. So we all have small little things that have happened in our lives that build up. So it could be, a small car accident. It could be not something major in life. It could be small things that kind of have repeated in our lives. So for kids who have academic struggles, like what their academic success looks like might not be like their peers. And so their struggles and frustrations, embarrassment and shame, especially if it's not being treated right, or, they're not learning the right tools, then it can build up over time. And that increases that shame and embarrassment, that having to read out in class in front of everybody when you're struggling with reading, really hard, not just that's stress producing. And that is small trauma that builds up. And for a lot of these kids with neurodivergence or learning difficulties, we see tons of stress. There's embarrassment. Sometimes there's teasing, bullying, that kind of, so it layers on and layers on. And so what we see an overactive stress system, that stress system stays switched on even when we're safe. Like our stress system is supposed to go on when we're unsafe. Historically, when there was predators, when there was something in the environment that was unsafe. But for a lot of these kids, it goes switched on even when they're safe. And then they're hyper vigilant, constantly like feeling danger and unable to relax. And so the brain goes into survival mode and it prioritizes safety over learning or connection. So when a
Mhm.
child in that stress response, they can't learn. Like they're not in their frontal cortex.
Right. Mhm. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think of neurodivergence, dysregulation, and trauma as kind of overlapping in the brain. Sorry.
Mm.
And
Oh.
yeah. So, like, we can have, like, a lot of our kids might have sensory overwhelm. They might have executive functioning difficulties. So, again, that difficulty with planning, self regulation. Then they emotionally can't regulate. They can't manage and express their feelings. And then there's hypervigilance, a constant alert to potential threats. So,
Mhm.
there's a lot going on in a child, right? So, then other model of the brain that's a little bit more complex, but I love using it with kids because I have like stuffed animals that I use and I teach it to teachers and parents, is Robin Goepel's animal brain model. And she talks about, again, if you use this is the owl brain. This is when you're calm and curious, ready to learn. The owl can think clearly and make good decisions. Like right now, we're both in our owl brain, right? And this is all true for children and adults. Like this doesn't, we're all human. This is how it works, right? And so when we flip our lid, then we might go into fight or flight mode. This is our watchdog and it's ready to protect. But when you're in fight or flight, when you're feeling that danger, you can't learn, right? And for
Mhm.
some people, at times we go into possum brain. And in North America, most people know what a possum is. In this part of the world, they're not so common. But they're a great example of the freeze or shutdown mode because when he feels overwhelmed and he feels he's dead, right? And it works. These predators believe he's dead and they leave him alone. But this is
Mhm.
when kids shut down, they go into withdrawal or disassociation.
Right.
So if we
Yeah.
look at these three models and we help educators remember that when a child is in any of these, this mode, they're not in thinking brain. And so this is true when a child's having a meltdown and we're trying to get them like back on gear, or when a child just is scared because they can't get the right answer, or they come out with anger or big emotions, crying, sadness, or they shut down, which we also see with kids when they're just overwhelmed and don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have examples of that.
Oh, definitely. I even think as an adult, I'm thinking of some examples. So
It
for
happens
sure.
to all of us. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
all human.
Yeah.
It happens to all of
Yeah.
us. But if we
But
if we can help teachers understand, or parents or educators, that when they're in this mode, there's no learning. So stop trying to teach. And you need to connect. You had a question later about like rapport, and that's a
yeah.
lot of it is if you don't have a rapport with the child you're working with, if they don't feel safe and trusted, then nothing's like if they can't trust you and feel safe, a safe
Mhm.
physical environment, safe emotional environment, they're not going to feel that like they're not going to learn.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. That's so informative. And like I said, I think anyone listening can think of how it relates to themselves just as a person, right? And then, okay, now we have our layers as an educator or parent or caregiver. It's so relatable. And I think I especially like the animal one because I think for kids, that's something that they can relate to. And I think in schools or let's say even remedial work, we're kind of focused, oh, I have to teach them the skills. They're so behind. We got to go fast. We got to catch up. We got to. But sometimes kids having that language of understanding and learning their own self can be very helpful in that process, right? Like if they maybe recognize some signs like, oh, I'm starting to feel stress. I need a break. Or, I mean, it's all age appropriate, I'm sure, right? In terms of how you can do it. But that concept is there. And then that rapport piece too. So what are some strategies for building that rapport or setting up lessons, things to be on the lookout for? Because I think I'm kind of going maybe back again too, like those small traumas that you talk about have an additive effect, I'm sure, right?
Mm,
Because these kids are going to school every day, they're seeing this, and it's like daily drops over time add up.
right.
And I'm acknowledge it's not the same as like a big trauma. However, for those kids, it's very significant.
Right, and what is happening really in the brain in those times is really the same. It there's might be a different causes for it, but our brains work in similar ways. Brain trauma can cause, like, I don't wanna say brain damage, but, like, parts of the brain to kind of be stumped, so that's a little different, but yes, but yeah, it is quite similar, and so back to just the safety thing, it's always about connection before correction. So let's say a child is
Okay.
struggling with a lesson you're
Mhm,
teaching. Stop and get connection before you try to correct if you see the child in any of these states, if they're starting to shut down, if they're starting
mhm,
to they're not being able to learn. So again, in the owl brain, you're connected, you're co-regulated, so the adult is
mhm.
regulated. This is easier for teachers, like for parents, sometimes it's harder, but you're
Yeah.
regulated and your regulation, you help the child regulate. And then in this place, they can problem solve, they can build skills, they reinforce trust because you're
Mhm,
affirming their engagement, positive choices, sense of safety. But when you're seeing them in this unsafe mode, this is like when they're agitated, irritable, um, refusing to do work. This is where you have to ensure safety. So create the physical space, stop, remove any triggers, put the
mhm.
books aside, get out a toy, something light, get outside.
Didn't break or
Yeah. Validate their feelings. "I see you're feeling really scared right now," offer them,
mhm,
like, breaths, quiet time, a calming presence, avoiding demands, making things a little bit easier, and set gentle boundaries to get safe, and then without shaming, and then slowly try to get them back in owl brain. And again, if they're in possum brain, they might be really overwhelmed. So they might be staring out, zoned out, not really responding, staring blankly, withdrawn. And this is a gentle presence, being nearby, not overwhelming them, quieting down, low stimulation, give them a little time and space, offer comfort. So those are just some things to think about if somebody's in that mode. But then when we go about like applying this model and looking about what we see. So in a dysregulated sign, like signs and impact would be like behavior, there may be outbursts, rule breaking in school, fidgeting, withdrawal.
mhm.
Emotionally, it could be sadness, anxiety, frustration. But I think sometimes in classes, we know that the kid who's really struggling might become the rule breaker or the class clown, some way to, maybe even get kicked out of class
Yeah,
because it's too hard to learn, and that's
it's a good
easier than
coping
like
strategy too, to
it's so
disengage and get out.
exact and I just before we get into some more strategies, like just the trauma and stress and the chronic dysregulation can like how that can look in class is poor focus, attention or memory, so difficulty sustaining attention, struggling with processing new information, disrupted executive functioning, compromising with planning and organization, difficulty with self-monitoring and problem solving, and then with problem solving and planning, maybe impulsivity or struggle to think flexibly. And so then it kind of creates a pattern, right? This
Yeah,
stress, and they might have
exactly.
dysregulated behavior, and then academic troubles get worse.
Dominoes from there, what kinda negative cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. But, like, knowing that the underlying reality is that they might just be really overwhelmed and that they need to feel safe and connected. Just wanna stress that. And so some trauma-informed principles we looked at is safety,
Mhm,
trust, empowering the child, giving them choice, self-efficacy, uh collaboration, like what can we do together with the child, maybe
mhm.
including the parents, and
Right.
obviously strengths-based, always looking at what their coping skills are, what their strengths are, and kinda using that to help them.
Mhm.
So gonna go through, like, 2 different ideas of practical strategies. Just the
Okay.
overviews would be, like, co-regulation before self-regulation. So the child's not gonna self-regulate. They use adults to co-regulate. So how we appear, how we present to them, if we're calm and
Interesting.
organized, that's gonna help them that way. Providing the things that are pretty basic for kids with learning difficulties, but it's always good to be reminded, consistent schedules, clear expectations, routines,
Mhm,
calm corners. If kids have sensory needs, which a lot of our kids do, providing self-soothing and
mhm,
sensory regulation, relational, building strong, trusting relationships, and the teacher caregiver teamwork. So really working as a team is really
mm,
important. So then
right.
if we look at like practical tools, like just the next step down, be giving kids, like you were talking about, helping them learn about all of this, what's going on in their body, what are like using these animals or these names of things. So remembering that a calm body is needed for a calm brain. Regulation comes before reasoning. Like body-based things. It could be movement. First, let's do some movement or pushes or chair pushes for like younger kids to work well. Animal walk, squeeze your whole body and release, bilateral
Mhm,
tapping. I teach kids to tap on their lap so like they don't have to like draw attention to themselves. Yeah. Um, that's when like things feel really big, or anxiety before tests or
Mhm.
transitions. Really good. Bilateral tapping we know helps calm. And so if you're like working individually with a child or sitting with them to help them teach, you can demonstrate that. Or if it's like in a classroom and they want to draw attention, you just put your hands on your lap and you would tap and take slow breaths with that. Again, teaching kids breathing tools, really important. There's so many different five-finger breathing, bubble breathing, box
Yeah.
breathing. Lots of kids have learned these, but reminding kids to use these things.
Mhm.
Using like either zones of regulation or feeling charts, or I feel scared because I feel overwhelmed, so that they can name emotions and then break it down. And
Mhm.
providing definitely, especially in school, like a calm place where they can kind of have a place to go if they need a minute. Visual timers are really helpful, knowing how long something's going to last, what's coming next.
Mhm.
But then
It's
as we
funny.
get a little, go ahead.
Oh, I
Go ahead.
just said it's funny that you mentioned that because, like, the OG lesson is so structured. Often, say kids will say to me, "We're here. We have just this, this, and this left," and I'm like, "Yeah."
It's very structured, which is
It
really
helps
good.
them keep an
Do they
order,
have
and they know where
visual?
they are.
Is there a visual of it?
S I haven't used visual in a while, but I've made them before, but kids just know the order.
No,
It's like
no
anything
order.
you do.
Yeah,
Like, when I go to
yeah,
a restaurant, I go in, I sit down, I order.
yeah.
The OG lesson's the same. We start
It's
this
very
way,
broken down, very
and after
structured.
a few lessons, they just kinda know, well, this is first,
Yeah,
this is second, this is third,
and
but
that's so helpful, and they know it's like a 30-minute or an hour lesson or
yeah,
whatever it is.
sure never changes. It's
Yeah,
always the same.
and that's really important, and I think it's one of the, I mean, also OG uses multisensory, at least in the beginning, right? And there's tools and there's rules, and it's
Yeah.
very like, yeah, there's a lot, I mean, to this day, my daughter did, OG, and I didn't sit in very
Mhm,
many sessions, but there's certain rules, like, of, like, writing that I
mhm,
remember, and she still struggles. I'll be like, "There's an E at the end. E makes the vowel say
mhm.
its name." I learned that sitting in an OG lesson. No,
Yeah.
I learned that. No, but it's so that's so helpful that it's so broken down
Mhm.
like that. So, yeah, it's really very important. Yeah, so then I would say for, like, older kids, then you do, like, get into, like, early body signs. I find for my younger kids, for a lot of them, it's really hard to, like, get into their body, but, like, "What do you feel in your body?" Because obviously, but I start teaching it from young kids, but as teens as we get into teens, they understand better if they understand, like, they can, if they understand why they're feeling this way. So, yeah, where do you is your chest getting tight? You have racing thoughts? Are you
Right.
what's happening? And then exactly, because once you start realizing what your body's doing, then you can know what's happening and then kind of stop before it gets too bad, right? And take a break, or grounding techniques like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the scan, that one, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, that one. Cold water on your wrists, feet on your floor, grounding, like especially with
Mhm.
anxiety.
Yeah.
Teaching them thought versus a feeling. What's the difference? What do I need to do right now? Name
Mhm.
it to tame it. And then like choice-based coping menus. So like, if can they use music or movement? Can they talk to someone? What is the thing they need? Choice restores autonomy, and then it reduces the escalation. And so I know, like, in an OG lesson, this stuff's going to be really hard because you don't have a lot of time. But on the same thing is, it's important to like you're saying, like, you're not gonna get anywhere if a child's so anxious
No,
that they
no.
focus.
Or if they just break down and start crying or refuse to engage. One of the real reasons I'm interested in this conversation is one of the OG principles that guide our instruction is emotional soundness of the lesson. And I think the way it's phrased in my interpretation tends more toward like instructional approach that we go in small steps and all this kind of thing. But I think we need this other knowledge that you're talking about because that is setting the stage for emotional soundness in a completely different way to support the students to be where they are. Because most kids, if they come for tutoring or go for extra help in school, they know what they're doing. They know it's more work, it's extra tutoring, it's extra this, and that alone is just like when you're a kid, know what I mean? And then, so one thing I wanted to kind of maybe wander into is how this affects like student self-esteem and how you see that trauma connection there. Because this is what I found, like even with students I've worked with, just general that you can remediate kids, but what's harder to help them with is that sense of self that they don't have because
Yeah.
of these small traumas, and they see others doing things they can't do.
I think, first of all, I mean, there's so much literature and research on early intervention on whatever we're talking about.
I know.
But, the earlier my child was really lucky. She was assessed just after she turned 6, and at that time, the assessor said, "Look, I'm not gonna diagnose it, but, like, it's
Mhm.
there's a lot of signs of this, we should do intervention." And we
Yeah.
got great OG early on, and I don't think she has the most severe dyslexia, and obviously, she still has it, she still has signs of it, but
Yeah.
that early intensive OG early on, I think made a world of difference, where I see kids I work with or friends of kids who are diagnosed at 9, 10, 11, and you're like, "Whoa." And now, yeah, now their self-esteem is so affected because at 6 or 7, going to tutoring, you don't quite know what that means. You're going to have
Well,
fun at someone's house, and
I
yeah,
think there's self-awareness, but I mean, obviously the cognitive development between 6 and 9 or 10 is
yeah.
different, right?
And I also see with, like, my younger kids, like, for at school, if they get pulled out for OT or tutoring or
Mm,
specialized learning, again, the younger ones, it's not that big of a deal. As they get older, they're much more self-conscious. They don't wanna be taken
mhm,
away from their peers no matter what the lesson is. They don't want the attention drawn on them. They don't want people asking, "Why were you pulled out?" And so,
mhm.
obviously, the older they get, and yes, absolutely, I think you're right, it does affect that. So I think the more we can come from a strength-based approach and also helping them understand their brain, that, your brain, if you have dyslexia, if you have learning difficulties, if you have dyspraxia, if you have, autism, whatever it might be, that
Yeah,
we explain the brain. I just got a family coming to me, with a child who's 12 and they haven't, like, disclosed the diagnosis. Obviously the child knows, but, like,
they do know that even
there was a
6 cents, they know there's something going on, right?
and, I think parents often not only to protect a child, but they think, well, if we make a big deal about it, then it's worse. Well, actually, I think it's how we tell a child and what we do with
Yeah.
that information and how we, explain to a child that your brain's different. It's got these great skills because of it. And if you look at, like, Branson and his work on dyslexia and
Mhm,
his, like, Dyslexia University, and he's trying to bring the light about it. And, like, we need more people with this brain.
mhm,
And so, like, helping people understand that there's challenges and then there's strengths. And
mhm,
coming from that strength base, and of course, not every school is coming from this approach or not every program,
mhm,
but the more we can help a child realize that you might need extra help in this, but because you have dyslexia or because your brain works differently, you have these skills that somebody else doesn't have. So I
mhm,
think that is one way to help kids work through that. But yeah, absolutely. A lot of kids who come to see me have learning challenges, and it's just one more. I mean, life is hard enough, teens hard enough,
mhm,
and then to feel different in any way
mhm,
is challenging. Something that also, like, kind of goes on top with, like, how you relate and how you build rapport is, Dan Hughes is, like, a psychologist who specializes in childhood trauma, and he has something called PACE, which I teach parents, but I think it'd be really great for professionals as well. And it's talking about coming from a pace is playful, accepting, curiosity, and empathy. So if you're coming from that sort of framework of,
right,
the way you use your tone of voice, like, is playful, you soften at your, face, you get down on a kid's level, acceptance, knowing that they know that their inner life is safe with you and you can really accept and not be judgmental. And coming from that place of curiosity, using "I wonder, could it be that you're feeling, could it be that this is too hard? Could it be that, can you help me understand? I'm trying to imagine." The kind of language we use. And then the E is empathy. So, just it sounds like it's been really tough. I can't even imagine how this is for you. But really, so I just was thinking about it when I was getting ready to talk to you. PACE is something that I actually don't even put in my training, but I work with parents on. And I think that's
mhm,
also really easy for practitioners to remember. PACE, it's an easy thing, it's
mhm,
easy to look up. And you coming from that approach. So, constantly coming from this more gentle approach and
mhm,
realizing what saying, like, "You're not gonna this part of the brain is not working if I'm not in this
mhm,
part of my brain." Like, so
right,
if I'm in one of these 2 parts, we can teach all we want, learning's not happening. And
mhm.
so always coming, and I think helping parents understand that, because 'cause they're paying for your time, they want results.
It's not just push, push.
Teachers feel that way. Yeah, and I think, like, if schools could come from a more trauma-informed approach, not exactly with all kids, but particularly like kids with learning difficulties, because there is this push for results, results, results. We don't have enough time. Move,
Yeah.
move, move. And
Yeah.
it's
It's
not gonna
not
get
gonna
anywhere if you don't stop and
sound
work on the
great.
social emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, for sure.
that's so true, and it's hard to see kids in that state because we do see them, and, there's the struggle for supports is real, like,
Yeah.
everywhere. So,
Yeah.
in your practice, what do you see as, like, the real needs parents are coming for or schools are reaching out for is, like, the hot button topics right now or high level needs that you're seeing in your neck of the woods there?
The reason I started doing this training on emotional regulation is because
Mhm,
I found myself, I mean, I do work with some kids with severe trauma, with adoption, with, lots of complex issues where that is your classic trauma. Like Robin Gobel's work goes really deep into that. But
mhm,
Robin Goebel has some podcasts and she's got a great website and stuff. But I think people parents who are with severely traumatized children might go to that, or practitioners. But I find her stuff like she's got these first like 15 podcasts that you can listen to,
mhm.
and I just find myself listening to them over and over again. I find them really useful. So, but
Yeah.
I'm getting this need for emotional regulation, and like I mean, it's unreal. I didn't even realize parents knew that word. And I literally get one request after another this last 6
Mhm.
months, year, of
Amazing.
every girl right now, a parent's calling or texting and like, "My kid's having a issue with emotional regulation. We need help. I need tools." And I'm just like it's just all I get. And then I was at a school thing, with different schools, and I was telling a few schools that I was doing this, and they were all like, "Yep, we need that. We want that." I did a workshop for parents at my daughter's school, and then they wanted a follow-up, so the counselor and I did a follow-up with more practical strategies. And yeah, just that is what is the hot topic, like, by far
Is
right
it
now.
for, like, general parents or parents of kids with more
Everything.
profiles and needs, so it's just every
It's
yeah.
everything because, like, at the parent thing at, like, my daughter's school, there's definitely parents who come up to me and say, "My kid's struggling with anxiety, my kid has learning needs, my kid is," whatever. But then there's just the average parent who's just, whether it's, like, the 5-year-old who's falling apart all the time or the
Yeah.
teenager, the parents going, "We need tools." And one of the things I think that came up really clearly in this parent trainings, these 2 trainings I've done for my daughter's school, is that generally we didn't grow up with any of this, right? And so unless you're in this field as an educator or a psychologist or something working with children where you're kind of knowledgeable on the recent stuff, we didn't grow up with topic around social emotional regulation, excuse me.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you. So most of us, I think I was a little luckier. My mom was a social worker, but most people in this room, and my daughter's school is international. We have parents all over the world.
Yeah.
Nobody grew up with social. Kids didn't have emotions, and they certainly didn't express them, and there wasn't a lot of room for
Mhm.
that. And
Right.
so
Just
parents
different.
are at a loss.
Mhm.
It's different times, and we know more, and you know better, you do better. And I see parents are wanting to do better, but they don't have the tools. And I think a lot of educators don't either. So, and with education in particular, these like, I think the stress of like pushing these results based is so much even stronger. And for parents where they're really open saying, this is all brand new. They didn't grow up, they kind of know about this and that they should be doing it, but they don't have the language, they don't have the tools. And I think teachers are the same. I've done a couple workshops with Nausea and another group of team of us that have done a couple for educators. And the educator, they're also the part on emotional, like they're just on it. So I
Mhm.
think this is the area, and it's across the board, I think, that primarily what I'm realizing is the generation, at least my generation for sure, maybe younger generations, this wasn't didn't grow up with any of this. So the parents that are lost, the older educators are, and so that's what I'm hearing. The hungry topic is, and this goes across the board. I think all children,
Yeah,
we humans struggle with emotional regulation. So the more we
exactly.
understand it, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be
That's
the
great. It sounds like you're filling such an important need where you are and supporting
yeah.
so many people. That's awesome.
Lucky to do
So,
something I enjoy.
yeah, you
But
are for
always
sure.
learning. I mean, a lot of this is, I come from
Yeah.
a very different paradigm and a very behavioral
Mhm.
paradigm early in my, so really changed in the last 10 to 15 years, and so I'm very much just in a learning curves
Yeah.
myself.
But I
Yeah.
think I could say the same in terms of education and where I came from and learning how to teach literacy to Gillingham, to other things, to new research and stuff coming out. But I think that's kind of the joy of the perspective, what I mean, over time that you kind of see and you just keep enriching and learning. But as we wrap up today, what would be like a lasting piece of advice or one important thing you would want people to know about this trauma-informed work or how to support students? You've said many great pieces of advice, but I don't know if there's one thing you want to reiterate or something you haven't shared yet. Yeah, just love that. It's amazing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. So Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think because they both start with letter C, it's just such a good phrase, connection before correction. But I think, yeah, in all learning too, when you're the one who's teaching, and especially with kids where there's so many mistakes and errors, sometimes it's like the correction is there, but also thinking about, okay, what's important for me to really maybe choose to correct at this time, as opposed to logging my thoughts and okay, I have next lesson to review or I can reteach this next time. Because it's any of these remedial processes, like OG and things will get there, but the path is just the path you walk and it takes its time. Yeah. 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 Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. And I appreciate learning from you. I have so many things that I want to listen to again and take to support the teachers I work with and the parents I work with. And it's nice if we could just say it's all about the academics, but it's not. It's about so much more than that. And that other stuff should be the starting place as opposed to, okay, let's sit down. I have to teach you this. So it's really important. So thank you so much for your expertise and your time, Trixie. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. You too. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Learn Literacy podcast, your trusted source for learning how to teach literacy through language and structure. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with fellow educators and literacy advocates. For more information, visit learnliteracy.com and follow us on social media at LearnLiteracy1 for the latest updates. Together, we can empower every learner. Until next time, remember our goal of language for life.